Welcome back to another episode of the Buffalo Happy Hour. Mike, what's going on?
Derek, we are back in the still semi-foreign North Downs, but we're doing good. And we are joined here with a special guest. First, we have to give a shout-out to Addie's, first and foremost, as always, for allowing us to use her tasting room. So thank you, Addie's. We appreciate that. We'll start with introductions, and we'll dive right into probably things that most people don't know you for, and then we'll kind of touch on what they do know you for and go off the rails per usual.
Yeah.
So you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Nate Geary. I belong to WGR Sports Radio 550. I've been there for almost a decade. I'm old. So are you both, by the way. So don't even let me try to take the blame on this one. You both are old as shit too. I know that. WGR, I started there as an intern when I was a sophomore in college. Kind of worked my way up from disc jockey, so to speak, in board operator into on-air roles and so on and so forth. I'm also work full-time in sales and marketing, and I golf a lot. So my girlfriend gets the crumbs in between. That's kind of at least my current story of what I do with my life at 30 years old, which is pretty depressing outside of the fact that I get to drink a lot, which I know you guys enjoy doing as well, except you guys seem to do it a little bit more cost effectively than I but you know what? My podcast is sponsored by an alcohol brand, so who am I kidding? I get a lot of free liquor and alcohol too. So,
what is your podcast called?
My podcast is on the Buffalo Rumblings vidcast and podcast network. It's called Food for Thought. It's, at least in my opinion, I haven't really found too many other ones like it. That is it mixes my love of food and my love of football. And as we say, we combined two of your three favorite F's, food, football, and then we pick an F word for the week and say, get your mind out of the gutter. So like food, football, and fornication will be like the third F of the week, something along those lines, sure. Because, I'm a child, so.
I love it. How long have you been doing the podcast for?
This is, it's fairly new. My podcast co-host, Bruce Nolan, in finger quotes as he goes by, it's his alternative reality. It's not actually his name. I don't know his name. I've known him for about 3 or 4 years. I don't know his name. Nobody knows his name. Nobody knows what he looks like. And he basically has it made. He gets to do all the things we do, except he's got anonymity and nobody knows who he is, and he can say what he wants and no one holds him accountable. It's a life that I think we all wish we could live.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. It sounds great.
It sounds amazing.
I couldn't even fathom how you can maintain that in 2022, but good for him.
Me either. He could be 20. He could be 65. No idea. Yeah, no idea.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. Good for him.
Yeah, I agree.
So your background is kind of diverse.
Yes.
Because you went from being talked about in a Tom Brady conversation, and he was trying to configure what your Twitter handle meant because he had no clue what was going on. There's also a lot of people that listen to you on the radio and every day sitting in morning commute traffic, where I have the ability and luxury of texting you over something that I find absolutely hilarious that happens on air. And sometimes I get a response, and then sometimes it's like a 3-hour delay because you're doing 17 things at once.
Yeah.
But where did this whole thing start? Because it went from broadcast club in high school where,
That's right.
where you and I were picking different songs to upset the entire cafeteria to you still playing football in college. Mm-hmm. So can you run through that whole progression?
So for the listeners that don't know, or the viewers in this case that don't know, Mike and I have a long history together. We played high school football together, went to middle school together, were friends in high school, and then to your point, we both were in the broadcast club together. And no, our broadcast club is not as nerdy and geeky as any other broadcasting club you might think of. When you hear the word and the term broadcasting club, you automatically assume these guys never got laid in high school. And while that is mostly true, it ended up being a good springboard for me and a good resume builder for me going into college. I went to college like most Division III college football players with the aspirations of going to play in the NFL. Everyone overlooked me, I thought. It turned out I just wasn't that good. And I played for my first 2 years. I got some early playing time at Buffalo State is where I went, which is a great communications program. And played a little ball my freshman year, got injured, finished the rest of the season kind of on the shelf. kind of went into the next year with aspirations of kind of taking over as a starter, got hurt in spring ball, missed the rest of the season, and then going into spring ball my junior year. So this had been my spring semester of my sophomore year. I had so in Division III, if you're not familiar, we don't practice in spring with helmets, shoulder pads. It's just, shells, right? It's just
seriously
practice jerseys, which, makes sense because everyone is, taking it easy in spring ball when they're trying to make an impression on a coach. I'm kidding. Like everyone's like taking legs out and such. So I hope he's not listening, but Connor Donahue in high school, remember him?
Yes.
My left guard. He was younger than us. Our senior year, he's a sophomore. The thing he used to do more than any other person for whatever reason is when I played quarterback, he used to step back and step on my toe every day at practice, every game, every third play during a game. And I literally used to have to like punch him in the face mask because it just had been so bruised and scarred and gnarly that every time he stepped on it, it hurt worse and worse and worse, right? So this is something as a quarterback growing up, this is what you have to deal with, right? This happened to me during spring ball. And I took a snap from under center, got stepped on, and instead of him, letting up, he got pushed back. Therefore, I fell into my running back. He hit me knee to temple, out cold. I woke up on the sidelines on like 6:45 a.m. at a spring ball practice where it was like 35 degrees, and I was like, "What am I doing here? Like this isn't fun anymore for me." And I have a pretty long, extensive history of, a lot of concussions and brain trauma. So I decided at that kind of moment that I think I was done with football. I wasn't enjoying it the same level that I was growing up and playing Little League and getting into high school and more competitive and then getting into college. The competition didn't really fuel me anymore, which I think like when that point comes, you just kind of have to say, if the competition doesn't get you up in the morning and like get you to lift more weights and be better and get more reps in, then it's probably just time to quit. So I did that. I quit, medically retired, whatever you want to call it. I spent the next 2 months with some of the worst post-concussion syndrome you can imagine. I mean, ringing in the ears. I was having trouble seeing the color blue, just in broad daylight. Like you'd look at the sky and it was gray. So those were things I was like, I think I made the right decision here.
Sure.
It's time. But then it was time to figure out, I'm in college. I didn't come here to play football. I came here to get an education. So my dad reminded me. At that point, I was a general ed major. I was not taking classes very seriously, and I basically put myself a full year behind. So from that point, I decided to start taking writing classes. Took a writing class, found a great professor who was was teaching a class writing for the news. He was a Buffalo News editor. Read my first piece and told me, basically came up to me in class. He's like, "This is the first A I've given out in 10 years. Like, what's your major?" I was like, "I don't have one." "All right, well, who's your, guy, who's your counselor, whatever they call him, your advisor,
yeah,
right? Your advisor." I was like, "Don't have one." He's like, "All right, I'm going to be your advisor, and you're going to be a communications major." I said, "Okay, whatever." So I worked with him for 2 years. He got me an internship at WGR through some back channels, and I had Joe Biscaglia, who is kind of my mentor of this, spoke in a class of mine. I stayed after the class and I said, "Joe, I want to do what you do." He literally got me my internship, got me in, and I started from the ground floor doing an internship on 5 a.m. I would work 5 a.m. to 10 a.m. Monday, Wednesday, Friday. On Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I'd leave at 10 a.m. I would then go to Dick's Sporting Goods where I'd work till 5 p.m. And then I'd leave Dick's Sporting Goods at 5 p.m. and go to class and finish my night classes. So I grinded for 2 or 3 years, got an opportunity on Saturdays to just start dabbling on air. And it just kind of was a natural fit for me. So I went very quickly from, college athlete with not a lot of aspirations in the professional world to, getting my first opportunity on network radio during Bills season at the bottom floor, 7 a.m., first show, and I just kind of built it from there. And then a few years ago, Matthew Collar, who was the morning show producer, he left, got a new opportunity, which opened up a ton of opportunities for me. Howard Simon decided he no longer wanted to do pregame. I stepped into that, and that's kind of where I'm at now. So I'm I'm in the process of working 2 full-time jobs, essentially. Well, I shouldn't say that. I'm in the process of working 2 full-time careers. I don't work full-time at the station, but the pursuit of each of them is very interesting. I get to meet a lot of great, interesting people. My marketing job, I work on the West Coast, and so not a lot of people know me out there like they do here. But it's been a very interesting journey for me from kind of having no idea what I want to do to now having 2 things that I'm good at, that I like doing, that I could see myself doing both of. So it's been kind of a wild ride for me.
Was there some reservation when you were approached about a communications degree and you're like, I don't know if I want to go down that route, or did it kind of hit you as something you wanted to do right away?
No, I mean, it made sense to me. My grandfather would tell you that he's probably the motivation behind it. He's been telling me, look at those idiots on the news. You could be on TV. You're more handsome. You've got more charisma. And I said, all right, Gramps, I'm not a TV guy. So radio was really never in my peripherals. It was always I wanted to be a writer. And I did a piece about post-concussion syndrome and the dangers of concussions, and that's what kind of got my professor to look at me and say, like, what you're doing, it's very good. You're very articulate. You can write well. You should pursue a career in this, and I'd like to help you do it. But without Brian Meyer at the Buffalo News, like, I'm not anywhere in that career right now. So he really laid the foundation, saw things in me that I didn't necessarily see in myself, which I think is always important in college. And frankly, I wish more college experiences ended the way that mine did. Sure. I get the feeling that a lot of people go to college, they waste a lot of money, they're never inspired. And I know that's kind of lame to say, but like there is a level of college is supposed to inspire you to do whatever's next in life. And it gave me a lot of tools, and I met a lot of great people, a lot of great professors. And the internship opportunity, I've never applied for a job outside of my initial, internship application. Everything has sort of been like available opportunity. We like you, slot in, which I want to tell you is kind of the route that radio, that media is. Like, it's not really, hey, there's a job, go apply for
Sure.
it. It's about who you know. It's about having somebody that likes you, believes in you, and gives you opportunities that you don't squander. So that's kind of just been, year to year. I had no plans on going from part-time weekend anchor to, network radio host like I am now, where I do pregame, halftime, and postgame all on the radio network. I'm broadcasted from, up in Hamilton, up down to New York City when the Bills play. So it's a much larger reach than my normal Saturday show. So it's been an interesting ride in between there.
How did the marketing show up? Like, where did that begin?
So my boss at the radio station would call me one of the smart ones. I've had several very talented, more talented than me friends fizzle out, right? I'm not sure if you're familiar with my buddy Ryan Gates. He was the afternoon show producer for 2-3 years. And he got to the point where making whatever it is, $15,000 as a full-time producer at the station was not a livable wage. Shocker. So he basically said, I need to make more money. And he brought in a Mighty Taco hiring for a manager for like $16.50 an hour. And he's like, could I make as much as a Mighty Taco manager? When they said no, he decided to do the smartest thing, which is go out in the biggest cloud of smoke ever. And this is, I'm going to rewind you to 2018, the Buffalo Bills draft Josh Allen. Ryan and I are on air as soon as the first round ends going into the weekend. Ryan decided in that moment he was going to use the drafting of Josh Allen to tell the world that he's quitting because the Bills drafted Josh Allen. It got picked up by Yahoo, by ESPN, MSN, you name it. It was a national headline. Buffalo radio host quits his job over the Bills drafting Josh Allen. So he did the smart thing, right? He got out. So that's sort of the story. It's a great story, by the way.
Yeah.
And
he didn't like the pick?
There's a lot of people that didn't like the pick.
Like by the way, we were all across the street from the station at a bar because Murph and Tasker were on. We took over after Murph and Tasker. And everyone in that bar is Rosen. And, with the 7th pick, the Buffalo Bills select Josh. Everyone's like, yes! Allen, oh! And like there's this collective and audible just everybody together is so pissed off. So we leave, we go back to the station, do our thing, and he decided that night, he's like, this is it. Like, I'm gonna quit. I'm gonna quit anyways. I can't do this anymore. Turned into Corporate Gates, who he is now, and sold out, went into corporate world. But for me, I never viewed being able to live off of $15,000 as a viable option for me. So I decided to just remain part-time, not sign any contracts, just be a guy that they could rely on. But I needed to find jobs that I could make money, but have a flexible schedule. So if Howard was out and Jeremy needed a co-host in the morning, I could fill in and get my reps that way, right? So I started in sales. I had a great job at New Wave Energy for a couple of years, and I kind of buoyed it into the position I'm in now. And I grew a sales organization that had 5 direct clients to a sales organization that has over 100 direct clients. So we've grown it. It's been very fun. It's been rewarding. We help businesses, and I get to see a young guy who owns a business go from making $250,000 a year in revenue for his business to making $2.5 million, and that's a very rewarding thing to do on top of being a radio host. So that's it's kind of how I entered into the marketing world, but it's really more so the sales world. It just happens to be the avenue of which I can sell, and it's not an easy product to sell, digital marketing, but I have a lot of fun with it. The industries that I work in are very fun. I get to work with, recreational cannabis dispensaries, which is a really cool, up and coming, emerging industry that half the business owners today that'll own dispensaries in 5 years have no idea that they want to actually do that. So it gives a salesperson like me a lot of forward momentum, thinking like, hey, 5 years from now, I'm going to be working with business owners that aren't even owning their business right now. So from a sales opportunity perspective, there's a lot out there for me. So it'll be interesting to see like where things go for me, as a career, as I kind of head into a really interesting time for me with radio, because I'm at the 5-year mark of on-air experience, which is basically the benchmark of anyone that's going to get a job as a full-time, morning or afternoon drive host. You got to have 5 years of on-air experience. So I hit that mark this year. So, I think we'll kind of see where things go from here.
What would be the next step? Just being on air all day?
A full-time, like AM. So and this has always been kind of the thing for me that I find most interesting is I probably only have 5 to 10 years of doing both. I'm just going to burn myself out. And I don't want to burn myself out before 40. There's things I want to do. So, I guess my kind of plan is, I'd like a morning drive show where I get in at 5 a.m. and I'm on air from 6 to 10, and then I kind of go and do the rest of my thing for the rest of the day. I could still sell. I can still maintain all my relationships on the West Coast because 10 a.m. is 7 a.m. their time. Like they're not even up and running yet. So
play golf.
I play golf, right? So it'll be how that ends up working out. I mean, that's kind of what I would envision, maybe the most ideal scenario, so that I can continue making good money and kind of continue growing my name. And we'll see. I mean, those opportunities aren't the easiest to come by. So
Sure.
We'll kind of see how that works. But that would be my kind of goal.
It's interesting, too, because Howard and Simon have been on for 20-plus years.
Maybe longer, yeah.
Yeah, and it's a conversation that I've had with, like, our dads, basically, of the next generation of who, when you drive to work or when you're at work, who are you listening to on 550? And I always thought about this, too, like the next generation, per se, would essentially be like you and Joe.
Yeah.
Right? Like that seems logical because if one of the two are out, you guys are always generally the fill-in from an outsider's perspective, I should say. But having that flexibility is really cool because it allows you to still kind of do like the beat reporter aspect where you can call in on the hotline and then give your take on whatever the news is of the day. How does that even come about? Is it because someone retires and there's just an opening?
In our market, yeah. I mean, between Jeremy and Howard in the morning and, Chris and Mike in the afternoon, I mean, these are mainstays at the station for the better part of 20 plus years. And before that, Howard and Bulldog, Chris, they were both at Empire Sports. Mm-hmm. And then from Empire Sports, when that whole thing kind of folded, which is just too bad. I mean, and I tell Howard and Chris this all the time, in which I try to age them. I call Howard Dad. Howard's been a mainstay in my sports consumption life. I mean, pretty much as long as I can remember. So he's probably, and you know, I would tell this to all of them, and all of them would probably tell me that they agree. Howard is one of the most, enjoyable partners and experiences that I have on air. I mean, he's such a pleasure to work with. He's easy to work with. He's got zero ego for a guy that has more experience than just about anybody at that station. So retiring and kind of, I don't necessarily see this market having a big fundamental shift in the personalities that they have there. I like my role a lot because, again, it gives me the opportunity to fill in and be kind of the utility guy off the bench. And there is eventually a world I'd like to maybe give up my Saturdays, because I've been doing Saturdays since college, and I have not had a Saturday off in quite some time, you know, in quite a few years. And during the Bills season, when I work 8 to 8 on Sundays for a 1 o'clock kickoff, I mean, that's 5 days a week, you know, so it ends up being a lot. So there is maybe sometime soon. The problem is my Saturday show has become so popular. We get better ratings for our Saturday show than we've ever gotten. And I'm selling sponsorships and doing this and that, and it's kind of hard to say no, and it's kind of hard to walk away from it because I do have such a following for that show. And it is my regular once a week opportunity to get in front of a microphone and rep and just continue putting sound and putting bites and everything else out there for the world. So I don't know what the future holds there, but I would like to, I'll maintain this. I would love nothing more than a full-time radio career here in Buffalo. I mean, it's my hometown. I love it here. I haven't left. Mostly because I'm, kind of sitting around and waiting for the right opportunity. And I'm not in a hurry either, which I think is a good position to be in.
And correction, Howard and Jeremy is what I meant. So for, with everyone's lanes in regards to 550, because Sal has his own show, and then Sal's the one that always travels for whatever reason.
Yeah, he's the Bills beat reporter.
Yeah.
That's his job. But, he's also very good at... So, Sale's story is interesting, too. I mean, Sale went from being a high school teacher in Florida, kind of at my age right now. At 30, he's a track coach and football coach and high school coach in Florida. He comes up here, leaves his job completely without the aspects of a full-time radio job here. Did what I did. Got on Saturdays, Sports Talk Saturday, hosted that, took his reps where he got it, and then Joe Biscaglia takes the Bills beat and ends up leaving to go to Channel 7. And this would have been 7-8 years ago. Joe B leaves, the beat opens up, Sale takes it, and that's kind of been that was his full-time move into radio. So yeah, he's kind of a utility guy. He travels with the team. He's the Pagula Sports. He does the sideline reporting during the actual games itself, right? So he's, and he's a guy that's going to be in that position for a long time too. I mean, he's got the coolest gig in Buffalo. He's got our dream job, just sitting on a sideline, talking to players and writing about football and the Bills. I mean, he's got the job of a lifetime. There's no doubt.
Which I feel like Derek hasn't said anything in 15 minutes.
It's like we're at the high school lunch table at Frontier.
Yeah, sure, it's fine.
Just Mike just talking.
Yeah, right. He never stops.
But chill out.
Unfortunately, this is every week thing.
I assume you watched the interviews with McDermott and Bean during the owners' meetings, and it was really interesting to see their reaction to Sales questions compared to everybody else's, because he's got such a rapport and trust with them, and he has such a different take on questions where it's like, how's Josh Allen's throwing this offseason compared to, hey, who are you going to take in the Sweet 16?
Yeah.
And then he's like, it's such a different dynamic. But then when he comes on the show and then Jeremy asks him a very specific question about what Bean's idea is for whoever player, he's got that answer.
Sure.
But then he also understands what McDermott likes to eat on his grill. So is that because he's one of the trusted beat reporters? Because we've also worked with Vic Carucci, who's an absolute Hall of Fame legend.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. And is that just because he's been doing it for so long? Because Sale's not old.
No.
Or is it just because of the amount of access where he's consistently around the building, so he kind of just understands the the front facade.
Gotta also be personality.
Yeah, and then he can get behind it all.
Yeah, so a lot of it, frankly and transparently, we're the Bills flagship station. So
Yeah.
like we are. Everything kind of rolls through us. When there's a press conference, it's coming through us. And Pagula Sports itself is such a large entity and enterprise. They've had their hands in so many cookie jars. They're starting to scale that back a little bit, and you're seeing them sell some businesses, and you're seeing them do this and that. I was always under the impression that, for a good example is, right? So One Bills Live and The Instigators, right? Mm-hmm. They are syndicated and played on WGR. They are not WGR employees. They are Pagula Sports employees. Sale is a WGR employee, but we just re-signed our contract to be the flagship for the Bills for the next, whatever it is, 10, 15 years. And before we were the flagship, for a long time, Shred and Reagan were the pre and post game show, because it was 103.3 and 96.9 were the flagships. They lost that because we're the only sports station in town. I mean, frankly, it was weird that we didn't have it from the get-go. But once we took over flagship rights, there's a level of, not to say that, Jay over at the Buffalo News or, I think, Matt Perino and Ryan Talbot of New York Upstate and Syracuse.com, they're really growing into getting more exclusives and getting more opportunities to tell a really good story. But there are, in every local news and TV station, they'll get their once a year exclusive and have their video content or whatever and so forth. But I think of kind of with us, there's a level of wanting to make sure that we have the content necessary. We're the ones that are going to be kind of necessarily the voice for the organization, but being the syndicate for, I don't know how many 90 stations that pick up the Bills feed during the year. I think there's an important level of wanting to make sure that we've got the insight, that we've got sort of the head start on a lot of the breaking news stuff. But I mean, it's not like really sales out there breaking news all the time and getting ins. By the way, that doesn't happen because the Bills are easily the tightest lid franchise I have ever seen. When I started on air with the Bills in 2015, that was Rex Ryan's last year, and it was Doug Whaley's last year. I mean, that was the leakiest ship of all time. You had Doug Whaley going out to Jason Lockenfora and leaking out things, and they were using Jason Lockenfora as ways to figure out who was leaking information. And this had been something that the Bills were dealing with for years and years. Brandon Beane, Sean McDermott came here. I mean, no one knew about Von Miller until Von Miller posted about it on Instagram.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, there was no Rappaport, Schefter, none of them had
we
it.
didn't even know that it was being pursued. It was
Nobody
all Chandler
did.
Jones. That's
right,
it.
exactly. So it just kind of goes to show you that, I mean, we get the scoops, we get the inside, but we're not getting tipped off to anything. I mean, no one is. So it's. I guess I would say it's a testament to the Bills because I think they run a really tight, professional organization that they don't have to worry about people, with agendas or trying to get information out or. Mm-hmm. And I think they've got good rapport with these agents too, because if you're an agent and you got a disgruntled player in the organization, you might be the guy that goes out and says, "Hey, I'm going to leak something. I'm going to leak a story. I'm going to, leak a negotiation." And that doesn't happen. I think it's the organization from a professionalism and from a just the way they conduct themselves. It is a very unique. I think that the facilities are going to start to resemble the competency and the high level that they're viewed across the league. They're now going to have a stadium that I think probably matches. Mm-hmm. I mean, they have the best workout facility in football.
It's ridiculous.
Right. It's
and it's not a saying. It's not a funny joke. Like, oh, the Bills are when free agents walk in there, they will tell you this is far and away the best workout facility in all of the NFL and professional sports. And that's weird to say for an Orchard Park indoor weight room facility.
Which you brought up the stadium, so we just quickly to touch on, because obviously there's so much unknown. That was one of the main reasons that a lot of people that were advocates for putting it in the city didn't even think of. And at least in my opinion, didn't even think of, their office is still One Bills Drive. They're not going to move their offices, and they're not going to move the field house just because a stadium is downtown.
Yeah, so, I mean, you also have, though, like you look at some other teams, the Chargers and the Rams, right? Like they share a facility. The Giants and the Jets, they share a facility, but their practice facilities are miles away. You go through, I drove through New Jersey a couple weeks ago, and I drove past MetLife Stadium, and the Giants facilities right there. The Jets facilities, I think it's in Long Island or Staten Island or something. So like it's not anywhere close to the facility. So they could do it, but I would generally agree that I tend to think that the stadium being built where it is has very little to do with anything short of cost.
100%.
And they knew they were only getting about $850 million from the state. The Pegulas didn't want to put a lot of their own personal finances into this. And the money that they did put into this, they're just going to pay off with, personal seat licenses anyway. So it is what it is, right? And season tickets and revenue and such. So for me, the stadium was always going to be in Orchard Park. It was always going to be an open air facility.
Yep.
And the reason being is you could tell me till you're blue in the face how bad you want it downtown and how much that's going to attract business and create economic boom. And study after study after study just proves building football stadiums does not generate revenue. It does not generate profit for states, for municipalities. Instead, what it ends up doing is being a money suck. And you're promised this is a one-time thing and the state's going to cover X amount of dollars, but then there's maintenance. And then there's the thing that nobody really talks about for whatever reason is the infrastructure that would have been necessary to build a downtown stadium. You can't just demo the Perry projects and build a stadium there and think, we're good. You're going to have to completely reroute traffic, completely rebuild the 190. You're going to have to completely rebuild the Skyway and rebuild and create multiple avenues and parking and
water.
Water is a major obstacle for them.
The underground utilities.
Right. So just thinking about that alone, we're not even talking about the core cost of the stadium. We're talking about the stadium, the cost of redoing that infrastructure, displacing people in the community and having to buy that property and get them into it. So to me, as much as all of us want that, this isn't Dallas. It's not Austin. It's not Los Angeles. And the owners, we're not here to spend hundreds of millions of dollars in keeping the team here. So I think we got everything that you could have potentially asked for. Bills are going to be here for another 35 years. They're going to have an updated stadium that should be state of the art. And the company that built it, the Tottenham Group, is an unbelievable stadium. So I think Bills fans have a lot to be excited about.
Where are we going to tailgate now, though, for like the next 4 years while they build it?
Yeah. So it'll still be. That's a good question.
We'll burn down ECC South, and then we'll just use that whole lot.
I saw a story recently that ECC is like $1 billion. I'm not even kidding. Like $1 billion in debt. Yeah. Because enrollment's down by like 65%, and the endowments, and they are going to turn that into a nice flat surface. No doubt about it.
We'll talk about it in the weekly episode because there's a lot to dive in.
Then? But yeah.
Oh, no, not that DMV. That's the most efficient one I've ever been to.
So from getting back to asking questions, when McDermott first came here, 550 was almost like vomiting over his generic responses.
Over it,
yeah, because it was so hard to break into his brain, and he was so vague. And it was extremely professional. However, he didn't let anything out where he's just like, we're going to trust the process. And you're like, cool, but there's no outline of what that process is. And I can't do my job and sit here and talk for 6 to 8 hours because there's nothing to talk about because you didn't give me anything.
Right.
Whereas now he's making jokes about the difference between North and South Towners. So do you...
It exists.
It does exist.
It's a good joke.
Do you think that although they are as tight-lipped as they are, we are getting better responses from that level of organization?
I think McDermott is just who he is. His communication style, the method in which he delivers, I don't believe you're going to get too much more than you've gotten. And I found it really funny that like they were there and they had McDermott up at the owners' meetings and they were asking him questions about the stadium. I'm like, what's the point of that?
Right. He doesn't.
Yeah.
Even if he knew, he would tell you nothing. I believe in terms of communicating and communication and having an open line, shedding some light. This has always been my argument about NFL teams and why McDermott can frustrate me and frustrates not just people at my station, but the media. It's a professional sport. This is entertainment. And I get the quote unquote, well, actually, I don't get it. I understand why it's the excuse, but I don't believe it's viable or actually has merit. But, some sort of competitive advantage. I don't believe that exists in your lack of communication with the media, not wanting to give them. And listen, frankly, the reason now, you think back to that, what is that, week 13, week 14, that first Patriots game where they lose at home in that windstorm. And he says, don't give Bill Belichick too much, more credit than he deserves. And that quote got 4 days worth of content for ESPN, for NFL Network, for us, for everyone, right? And if you're Sean McDermott, you're like, that's why I don't say a damn thing, right? Like,
Sure.
and because that was taken out of context. He wasn't saying, Bill Belichick's not good or whatever. Like, it was just him saying, listen, like, this had nothing to do with Bill Belichick. There was 70 mile per hour gale force winds. Like, it's as simple as that. We don't have to make it into some sort of coaching brilliance. And it got misconstrued, it got misinterpreted, and that's why you probably will see him never, say things and be candid after a game. But on the other end of that, I like Brandon Beane a lot. I think he does give you insight. If you ask him a question, he'll give it to you. And part of this, and I hope that all of the colleagues in the media know that I respect everything that they do, but a lot of it is a level of ignorance of the sport and not being able to take questions past, Josh Allen played really well today. What did he do well, right? Like, and being able to take it 3, 4, 5 layers deeper and say, hey, on that play, I saw this, what did you see from the sidelines? And there's not a lot of that deeper content-driven stuff where you've got football fans that more than ever understand the intricacies of football. Everybody knows, for the most part, that watches football, what the hell cover 3 is and what cover 4 and what wham and ISO. Like, they know these hot phrases, and they now want to hear the coaches talk about that strategy. They want to hear general managers and players talk about that strategy. But if you're the media and you're tasked with asking questions, I am not in the pit. I'm not in this, in the media scrum to ask these questions and to take things a little bit deeper than, hey, and I hate the question of like, hey, what did you see on that play? Who you're going to ask him to go back to a play in the third quarter and tell you what he saw on it? I think there's a lot that, in terms of media and football itself, the expertise necessary to really get the answers you want to get out of these players, it goes more than just asking the baseline stuff. And it can be hard to, when you're a news station and you're covering the Sabres, the Bills, the Bandits, the Bisons, and you're doing, high school sports, it can be time consuming to be able to say, like, I focus on football. I played football. I can hold a conversation with XYZ because I know enough to get some decent answers. And that's where I think probably when I get the opportunity, when Sean was on the morning show, Sean does, and Coach McDermott, I should say, does the Extra Point show with Joe and Sale. And when I was on the morning show and I get to fill in, I always took the opportunity to try to squeak in a question or two that went a little bit above and beyond a normal question they get asked every week.
One of the most frustrating questions that kept being asked, I remember this so well this last season, was when we lost to Tennessee, and the one part of it was when Josh Allen slipped on that 4th down conversion, and everyone was asking what happened. It's like, you saw it.
You
like,
saw
what
it
do you
for
mean?
yourself.
What happened?
Right. What happened?
Football happened.
Yeah.
Like,
what
do you want
doing?
me to turn it around and explain it in a different way?
Right.
There's a specific cleat that missed the grass.
Right. And there's a
the
yard
slick
line
part.
that he has to get to technically convert that first down. He fell just short of that line. Right. And again, and that's the kind of question that gets asked over and over in like 5 different ways. Right. I mean, what is that really bringing, like, the consumer of the sport,
But then you also get the adverse where Cooper Kupp answers a question after a game and uses specific NFL level intricacies.
The Rams are a different story, man. Like, have you ever seen any of those videos of McVay?
Yeah, where he recalls
recall
things. Yeah,
from his time as the tight ends coach in Washington, where he had no involvement in calling plays. Like, that is to me the very opposite end of Sean McDermott, which is a guy that doesn't have a problem telling you, what a particular play call is, because do you know what, Spider Y X banana is? Nobody knows what that shit is. I mean, but at the same time, like, that is, for me, for people with a higher level, I mean, just unbelievably fascinating.
Yeah, and then especially when, like, there's a too high safety. We would say I was able to turn the safety's hips, which allowed me to break into this separate route, which my quarterback could see, and then you're just like, oh, that's amazing. Except he's using specific lingo of what they call turning the safety's hips. And you're like, why do you call it that?
Yeah, right.
So that is, I think, because you and I do it a lot, we'll sit down and we'll watch like NFL films. They'll bring Taylor Lewan in, and they're like, run us through this tape. Yeah, and you can sit there and just watch these guys watch tape, and you're like, why am I obsessed with this? And then, like, your girlfriend, our wives are just staring at us like, can you please not
drinking their glass of wine? Like, when is this over? Do you want to watch Netflix?
I get the classic, are we able to watch something we both want to watch?
Yep.
That's how it's phrased
and
to me.
I do that thing where, and now I've gotten to the point where it's a crutch. I know exactly what she said, but I say, huh? What? You heard me. No, what'd you say? Yeah, I just, it's selective hearing, I call it. But yeah, no, it's funny because, like, I watch especially with me in golf, like, oh my God, that poor woman.
That's him.
I watch,
all day, every day.
and I'm watching, it's dark out, there hasn't been a golf ball hit in 2 hours, and I'm hearing, Faraday talk about the seventh hole for the 15th time, and there's just something about sports and consuming it and listening to it. Because listen, people ask me all the time, Nate, like, how do you know this stuff? I will be on a call, or I'll call into a radio station in Toronto and I do an interview, right? And they'll ask me, hey, talk a little bit about the draft, or tell me who you like, blah blah blah. I'm like, oh yeah, such and such, 6'5", 240, really love what he did in college. And then when he and I'm thinking about, it's subconscious, the information that I pull. And I was talking to one of my dad's friends who's CEO of a pretty big company, right? And he actually is retiring. And he asked me when last summer we were golfing together, he's like, have you ever tried to apply it to
anything else?
Finance?
Right, something productive.
Like, finance? Who the hell wants to do finance? No, I have never applied it to finance. I'm a bright, but it's right here in this very niche thing that makes no money.
It's like Kevin from The Office when he's like, I don't know, 752 pies. And it's like, you did that for pies, but you can't do it for accounting.
I wish, the real world application of me being able to make money with the things that I'm able to quickly recall from my brain, is I would love to, but I'm useless.
So not to turn dark, but Sabres.
Sure.
How
it's brighter now.
It is, and it actually, I've been telling a lot of people this. It's kind of exciting to watch them now because they might not still be amazing, but they're playing with a lot of passion, and to me, that's exciting. Watching the game recap of last night when they won with 13 seconds left. Sorry, but it was some crazy amount of time left, and it just bounced off the goalie's skate, and everyone just celebrated. It was just amazing.
They're getting lucky. There's I guess part of what their problem has been for so long is you don't want to feel like you go to a sporting event and care more than the team playing. And I think, listen, I think for the most part, Jack Eichel got probably an unfair-ish rap, but the relative quickness in which they've been able to turn things around since moving away from him, has been eye-opening for me. And the relative, problems that the Las Vegas, that the Knights are kind of running into with him playing. Listen, is Jack Eichel going to win a Stanley Cup for the Sabres? Probably. But I got to say, it feels nice to and admire guys because they play hard and they care and they love the city that they're a part of. That is, to me, and going beyond just the players and enjoying games and being more competitive, I'm enamored with this head coach. I'm just absolutely enamored, and I'm a fanboy of Don Granato. I just think he is one of the very few genuine people. He comes from a hockey background. His family is hockey lore, and his wife, his sister, they're all big time in the NHL and in scouting departments, and he just reminds me of a guy that gets it, that gets the bigger picture. And they backdoored their way into him, and that is sometimes how sports work. You just get lucky. You catch a break. And I think they're in the process of catching a whole bunch of little breaks that I think will pay off into a much larger, hopefully, right? A much larger. Listen, I mean, they're going to have more salary cap space than any team in the NHL next year with everybody that they care about coming back.
Right.
So they're going to have opportunities to incrementally grow this year. They've got 3 first-round picks the next 2 years. They've got 9 draft picks in the next 2 years in the top 3 rounds.
They have a lot of prospects right now.
They're going to be able to
Rochester,
transition all these great young players that have been. I mean, Jack Quinn has got to be as exciting of a young player as we've seen in a long time. He's going to be able to transition into the NHL, and they're not going to rip the cupboards bare like they did 5 years ago when Tim Murray was here, and he decided we're going to trade all the young guys, get Ryan O'Reilly, get Evander Kane, and then leave the AHL completely bare. And that's why a rebuild like that doesn't work. And I think, they've got a general manager that feels like, well, Kevin Adams has the full trust of Terry and Kimpagula. And I think that matters. I don't think the previous guys they came in, they believe in, they trust, and they genuinely like Kevin Adams, and I think that matters. He's given a luxury that, none of the other previous GMs were given, and GMs basically in major sports aren't given, which is, we don't care if you're bad. Just show us something. And I mean, in a year and a half, he's done that. And I think he's earned a lot of people's respect for a guy. Let's be honest. I mean, I laughed, and I mean, they've been a punchline for the better part of 5 years. Hiring a guy with no previous experience in the front office of an NHL organization is certainly a way to go. But let's be real. Everything they were doing, they were just in a perpetual state of darkness. And to see him creep back into the light has been an joy. I mean, I watched last night, turn the game off at 4-0, turn it back on, and they were down 5-4. I'm like, all right, I'll watch the end of this. It was a heck of a game to watch.
Oh, yeah. It was very exciting.
Yeah. What is it going to take from an organization standpoint above a head coach to get the Sabres as rock solid as the Bills? To at least get us back to like 2008 when we were winning President's Cups and things like that, because I still feel like, me personally, at least, because part of it's ignorance, I just don't know if the organizational structure's there to really
I think it is now. I would tell you that their organizational structure is the one thing you might look at and say, this is why they'll get out of it. Because they've, I think his name's Jason Karamanos, they have a couple other hockey analytics people that not only have the trust of the general manager, but it's almost like Kevin Adams' inexperience is actually a positive because he surrounded himself with people in analytics departments that he's empowering them to not just tell him what to do, but actually apply the things they're telling him to do. So in player scouting, I believe their drafting has been better. I believe that they've done a better job of acquiring better young talent, developing in that talent. I mean, Tage Thompson 2 years ago was a punchline. Jack Quinn, when he was drafted, was, why would you draft Jack Quinn? Marco Rossi was right there. You should have taken him, and instead they picked Jack Quinn, and now he is a 2.5 point per game player in the AHL, which is the most for a year 2 player in the last 10 years. So they are allowing data analytics to drive decision making. And I think that you go out and you go get a Shanahan, a Brendan Shanahan, right? Or you go out and you go get a guy that's won a Stanley Cup, a Hitchcock, like whoever you're going to take as head coach and general manager, you're going to go get guys that's been with 5 different teams, another retread. You're going to get the same ideology, the same ideas, the same principles being applied over and over. That was their failure. They were in a perpetual state of being unable to pivot away from ideals that kept getting them into the same position. And now the inexperience of Kevin Adams has allowed them to hear things, see things from a different perspective that any other general manager that walks in here is not going to give that respect because they know the data, they know the analytics that's going to drive their decision making. And because Kevin Adams didn't know that, I think it gave him a unique perspective to say, I'm going to empower a guy, a young guy who sees the game differently than me as a former player. I'm going to empower a guy whose analytics can tell me why. Moneyball, right?
Exactly.
It's essentially Moneyball, and being able to identify the guy on the 4th line in Pittsburgh who's being, I believe Vinny Hinostroza is the perfect example of this. A guy in Florida who was on a 4th line, bounced around the league, never really found a home, comes in, and now he's probably going to get extended. He's going to get a contract extension. He's playing the best hockey of his career because they're using underlying data, underlying analytics to say, maybe he's being miscast in this system. Maybe he doesn't fit best with that group of players or that style of player or that system. And let's bring him into a situation we think he's going to be able to excel in. And it's the same idea the Bills started with, which is we're going to bring you here. You're going to be the best version of yourself. And that was such a lame and tacky and not useful way of telling people that we're trying to build a culture. And they are using the same principles that McDermott and Beane used, right? Like they want guys that want to be here, that want to be in Buffalo. And that was cliche. And culture is a funny word and a laughable word and a non-serious word until it becomes the actual catalyst of getting out of the dark. And I think both franchises have done a unique job of creating a culture internally that, listen, I mean, you start applying these things to your everyday life, to your work life, right? Like, and I say this all the time. We talked about this about Sean McDermott, about people like, is McDermott losing the locker room? McDermott benched McKenzie, and that guy voluntarily re-signed here when he could have gone and hit the market and saw what he was. He didn't even get to free agency. He re-signed with the Bills. I mentioned this a couple of times in McDermott, right? McDermott's not the easiest to work for. A lot of rumors that him and Brian Dable butted heads. They absolutely butted heads. But what decision makers at jobs that are successful, that require the best, that demand the best, are easy to work for? Right. That doesn't exist. It's just this generation of people has become so soft to conflict, to getting pushback, and not having collaboration is more than sunshines and daisies, right? It is about getting uncomfortable, that is maybe allowing someone else who has a better idea to allow that idea to play out in real time. And I think with McDermott, with Kevin Adams, with Don Granato, with Brandon Beane, you've got a group of guys that understand that they need to create a culture where you're going to get the best out of everybody, but to get the best, you have to demand the best. And there's only a certain type of DNA, and that DNA becomes rarer and rarer the younger these athletes that are coming up in the system are. That culture becomes more important now than it was 10 years ago, when 15, 20, 30 years ago, when you had guys smoking cigarettes at halftime. Right. It's a different culture in society. So therefore, if culture in society is so important to building any work organization, that has to be equally or more important when you're trying to build like a success. That's why, listen, Bill Belichick, he ain't winning another Super Bowl, by the way.
Dude, he took over the entire offense.
He's got Matt Patricia calling plays. For Christ's sake.
Yeah.
That guy calling plays, you get the same level of success you get me calling plays.
Yeah, that's a bad organization right now.
But what it goes to show you is that style of leadership, that style of coaching, that style of management works when you have the best quarterback of all time. But when you don't have that,
well, that's what Matthew Judon came at Sal for. That was the funniest thing I've ever read. Yeah. When Matthew Judon started yelling at Sal Capaccio, because Judon was like, I can't bring anyone, I can't get anyone here. And then Sal's like, yeah, because you don't have Tom Brady anymore.
Yeah.
And he's like, shut up and start or help me out or stop recruiting or something like that.
Yeah.
Something crazy. But it was just so funny because you can't rely on that. You have to rely on the culture that you build.
Yeah.
And in Sabres talk, I think that's Tuck, right? I mean, Tuck is coming in as being like a leader. Sure, he's not putting up points every single game. I think it's been 10 games or something without a point.
But he's basically still at this point, still almost a point per game player. Scores last night. The catalyst of what he'll be this team. I believe he'll be the team's captain next year. But Dylan Cousins, part of the leadership has to start with young guys taking responsibility for things that maybe they wouldn't. And I think Kyle Oposo has been a huge, huge help for this team, considering he was part of all of those toxic environments. For him to be at the other end of this, I mean, shows the maturity level, shows the player and person that he is. To be a piece of the problem, but also be a piece of the solution is so rare in everything we do in life, right? Like, I think a lot of people could have let that consume them and be a part of that toxic culture. And instead, he's been a catalyst for change and a catalyst for improvement. So, and he's having one of the best seasons of his career. Right. I think Kyle Poso means a lot in that. To see the steps that Rasmus Dahlin has taken, to me speaks a lot to Don Granato, especially just with. I think it was so bad with Ralph Kruger that
we almost lost him with Ralph.
Yeah, I mean, legitimately lost him, and we almost lost Jeff Skinner, and he's revived his career. So I think it goes to show you that Ralph Kruger is a perfect example of how much coaching can matter. There are certainly instances where players talk or the players play, the coaches coach. But sometimes when you have a fragile and toxic locker room like they did last year, 2 years ago, when they had Taylor Hall and they had Jack Eichel, they had Sam Reinhart, your coach has to be more than just coaching and players playing. And that was, I think, that bore fruits to see. And now you're seeing like the opposite end of that. You're seeing the positive reinforcement. You're seeing that the scheme is matching the culture, and the culture is matching the attitude, and the attitude is finally matching the results. So it's a long time coming. I'm not sold they're just going to turn into a perennial, but I've got to feel that the city has seen one team turn around and become a consistent winner. The league is transitioning from the old talents, the Sidney Crosbys, the Alex Ovechkins, the Malkins of the world, right? The Brent Burns and the Erik Karlssons. Those guys are phasing out. Who's the next young, good team? And it convinced me it's not going to be the Sabres. Why? Why can't it be?
Sure. So going back to the Bills, a cheerier subject, we clearly made a lot of free agency moves.
Yeah.
On the O-line, D-line, everything. Who do you think that we're going after in the first round? I know that's probably like a typical question that you get asked a lot, but we've been talking about this for the past, obviously, couple weeks now. Is we didn't grab a cornerback at all during free agency. We didn't grab a wide receiver. So what are we going to do?
They just restocked. I mean, obviously, matching the Ryan Bates thing. I think that was I would say a source of a lot of anxiety. Yeah, they re-signed Ike Bucker. I'm not sure when he'll be physically available for them, but I think it's a good signing just to get him back and have that continuity. The Ryan Bates saga, so to speak, opened more questions and opened more holes in the roster with the idea that if they weren't matching his offer, it created a legitimate hole at right guard. They bring back Bates. So they've got their starting five. I don't believe there's a true hole on the offensive line now. I think you can keep drafting for depth, which they do a great job of drafting for depth. They drafted Spencer Brown for depth, and he ended up being one of their best players.
Literally a pivotal piece of our offensive line.
So the athletic, the athleticism on the right side of the offensive line when Bates gets in there at right guard, and you have Spencer Brown there at right tackle. You have two of the most athletic, and then you have easily the most athletic center in football in Mitch Morse. I mean, you have guys that can move. You got guys that you can throw. And I really like Aaron Cromer, their offensive line coach, a lot. Had a lot of success here in his previous stint. But all in all, to answer your question, kind of like where they go, I believe they truly can do a BPA, a best player available strategy. They can. It doesn't mean they will, because I think that where they are, I think the best player available will probably be a receiver or a corner, which are also what they need. I think receiver is probably their sneakiest need. I would agree that cornerback two is by far their biggest hole.
Right.
I would probably argue running back's a hole for them. So if I look at corner, everyone's up in arms. Well, they haven't signed a veteran. They haven't done this. They haven't done that. You could draft a guy at 25, plug stardom, and if Trey White has to miss the first 4 weeks of the season, you got your first round pick and Dane Jackson, you feel fine about that. I'm of the mind that I think you can still do that in the second round. I think you can still find a starting caliber corner in the second round.
Sure. There's like two of them that are really good, and then everyone else, all the other corners are
they're
like
all
the same.
kind of the same,
yeah,
and you can
exactly.
get the guy that you get at 38 is probably the same guy you're going to get at 57.
Sure.
So there's not a huge drop-off there. And there is a lot of value in day two in this draft and going into the early parts of day three. But for me, I keep thinking about, one of the things that I keep thinking about in this team is 2 years from now, Gabriel Davis' contract is up, Stephon Diggs' contract's up. Stephon Diggs will be 30 years old. We have seen what good teams with franchise quarterbacks, legitimate top 2, top 3 quarterbacks do. They don't pay receivers $30 million. And Stephon Diggs is going to make close to that. And he's probably going to want to make close to that this year or next year. I think the Bills are in a position where I'm not sure they can actually. Dawson Knox is going to be up next year. He's young. He's 25. He has built a strong rapport with Josh Allen. That's a guy I got to prioritize. Gabriel Davis and Diggs, you're probably going to get to pick one of those guys. You don't have a backup on the outside receiver right now. Jake Kumro's that guy, and Touchdown Jesus is funny. He's a good special teams player. He's not a guy I want out there if Gabriel Davis goes down playing 55, 60 snaps a game. I just don't want that. So I like Crowder a lot. I think he's a really good piece. I think he's better than Cole Beasley right now, and probably is the same. You're basically interchanging 2019 Cole Beasley for 2022 Jamison Crowder. So I love that move. I think they need a legitimate growth depth piece to grow with.
What's Hodgins doing? Is he, because we haven't seen him at all.
He's a big slot. He is not an outside receiver. He's the kind of guy that, and I'm trying to think of a good example of like a big slot. Like in this draft this year, Drake London is that player. He's a guy that's not going to operate as an X or an outside receiver. He's the kind of guy that's going to run those seam routes, a guy that can create mismatches with slot corners and linebackers because of his size. He is not a top-end speed guy at Oregon State, I should say. Hodgins was that big slot guy. And I still like him in that role. I think he probably plays that. I think he'll get an opportunity to be on the roster this year if they don't draft a guy at 25. But Stevenson is not a refined receiver.
Right.
He never was that. He's a straight line, run fast kind of guy, and there's roles for that in the NFL. I think they really need to look at, like, if Jamison Williams, if Treylon Burks is there, if one of these other big time play receivers are available at 25, I think the Bills have to really consider it, because for me, they're at a particular point right now where it's their fastball, right? And instead of trying to say, well, we're going to focus on corner, we're going to draft a guy at which they've always figured corner out. Mm-hmm. They've always figured it out. We thought they had the same problem last year. They re-signed Levi Wallace. We said if Trey White goes down, they're nowhere. Trey White goes down, and I don't want to say they didn't not miss a beat, but they were still the number one ranked defense at the end of the year. So, this defense, corner is important, but think about McDermott's defenses historically. Josh Norman, best year of his career, 2015. Unbelievable season. Best corner in football. Signs on elsewhere, never to really be heard from again, right? He went to Washington, never to be heard from again. James Bradbury, same system, right? Best year of his career, gets signed by the Giants, one of the highest paid corners in the league, and now he's getting traded, right? Or he's going to get cut or traded by the Giants. This system, McDermott's defensive system, can disguise a lot. You're not asking your corners to play a lot of press man. You're not asking your corners to occupy it and run with the best receiver. You're going to play in your zones. It's quarters, it's cover two. It's basic concepts, and you have the two best safeties in the league behind you. It's a huge advantage. So do I think they could go and get a Kevin Johnson type? They could go and get a whoever. They re-signed Cyril Neal for a reason. He's got the ability to play outside. I don't want him playing outside, but he can. So I get it. They need bodies at corner, 100%. And I would think that either 25 or 57 is a corner, but I want them to pick the best available receiver or corner wherever they end up at 25, and I don't care which one it is.
It's kind of nice to finally be in this position where we can pick best available. There's been so many years where we're like, we have so many holes to fill. Where do we even start?
And listen, they tried a lot at defensive end, at edge. They tried. They drafted two straight guys last year in the first and second round, and Basham and Rousseau, and hopefully those guys take steps this year. That would be big. They spent a second round pick the year prior on Ajay Epinesa, who has not really quite panned out. They spent money on Mario Addison. They've kept Jerry Hughes around. They bring in Efe Obado last year. Before that, they bring in Butler, who they drafted in Carolina a couple years ago on the interior, Star Latulele, and they just have not found the pieces inside or outside, really just the defensive line as a whole. Bean always just talks about that you build from the lines, you build the lines out, and they'd been spending the assets but not finding the return on investment. And I think this year, love the Tim Settle pick. I think he's going to be a fantastic piece in the middle. They're going to have a very different look defensive line. I'm just ecstatic to see what it looks like on paper.
Well, we talk about leadership a lot, and bringing Von Miller is more than just a superstar. Like, he will change the entire culture of that defensive line and the linebacker. Hell, he might even help Tremaine Edmonds out.
It's that's kind of a whole other can of beans. But he should, I think, I really wanted Chandler Jones for the same concept you're talking about, which is I think Greg Rousseau really has the ability to be one of the best in the league. I think he just needs someone that can help him refine his technique and give him some confidence. That position, you'd be surprised, is a lot about confidence and having a plan pre-snap and knowing when you're going in to a specific player at a specific time that you know what his strengths and weaknesses are. Have a plan, a pass rush plan, and having Shaq Lawson be able to give Rousseau more opportunities to be less of a run defender and be more of an edge pass rusher. I think that should open things up a lot for him. And also, I think Shaq Lawson's presence should keep Von Miller from having to be a three-down defensive end, which the fresher you can keep Von Miller, I think the more you're going to get in terms of a return on investment from him.
Especially at this stage, because it's his 12th year, 12, 13.
You wouldn't notice it, but yeah, I agree. I mean, he's not getting younger.
No.
And he reminds me a lot. Listen, I mean, Bruce had 3 of his best years of his career at 33, 34, and 35. So we know at that position, he hadn't been an every down player for the last couple of years. It's not like he's out there playing 60 snaps a game. He's out there playing 30, 35, 40 snaps, playing 55, 60% of them. And that might even go back here in Buffalo. He might play 50, 55%. And then you get to the playoffs, and that's when he can play 65, 70% when it matters. So they've always believed in healthy rotations at the defensive line, and they've given themselves a ton of pieces on that D-line.
I'm so excited for the season, which it happens every year, but it's just nice to, just not stress.
Yeah.
Because at least we still have a solid foundational team that we can rely on.
It's not about the team. You've got the best quarterback to ever step foot on a field in Buffalo. That's not hyperbole. He is an unbelievable talent. That's where everything stems from. That's why you get Von Miller. It's why you get the things you get is because of him. And I think for the better part of the existence of this organization, Jim Kelly's a Hall of Fame player, and he's a hell of a good player. Josh Allen is going to break every single passing record in 4 or 5 years from now. He's going to own every record this franchise has ever had that a quarterback can be involved in, and some that running backs are involved in. So he just, when you have a player like, that's right, when you have a player like that, everything changes. And we've all said it, but now that it's here and we're watching it, to know that it's actually true and it wasn't just things that people without quarterbacks would say as an excuse to allow whatever coach was going to be there for another year. Well, you don't have a quarterback, and that changes everything. It changes everything. And we're living proof of that, I think.
I was watching the Combine this year, and I went back to watch Josh's Combine, and it was crazy how the announcers were so spot on. Like, everybody hated Josh Allen. Like, everyone in Buffalo, like you said, Rosen all the way. And then even like all the other teams were like, Josh Allen's not like a first round, like he's not a top 10 pick at all. But then you go back and you listen to some of the commentators of the Combine, and they're like, this dude's throwing bullets,
right?
Like he's dropping them in 70 yards down the field, like he's going to be a great quarterback. And it just got me so juiced up. Like, I just want the season to happen. But it's crazy watching that Combine and seeing where he was now, or seeing where he was then and seeing where he is now. It's just like, dude, you're stunning.
Man. Night and day. Yeah, and stunning and brave. But yes, very such a unique skill set, and the arm strength and the athleticism and the speed and the just you name it, the ball placement and the ability to affect defenses and play off scripts but play on schedule. He can do everything, and he does it at such a high level, and I would tend to think we saw the ceiling in his MVP runner-up season, and then over the last 5 weeks from that first playoff game against the Patriots, that just the greatest single 4 quarters of football that I've just ever seen a quarterback play. I'm not sure we know what that ceiling is quite yet, and I think that's probably the most exciting part of this whole thing.
And that's what Carson was talking about. He's just like, I don't know if there's a ceiling for Josh Allen.
Yeah, there probably isn't.
He's getting faster.
Yeah.
Which it doesn't like. I mean,
his Combine 40 was so bad, and then they clocked him at doing like a 4.5 or something.
He ran like this. He didn't know what was going on.
Right.
And then now he's just like, I'm gonna literally run through you and your wife.
Who ran like that?
Mose Schrute.
Hauser.
Oh yeah, it was definitely Hauser for sure.
Yes.
100%. Yeah.
Wild times. Well, thanks, dude. Of
course.
How long has it been?
Plug your podcast again. Plug any social media.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Geary Sports, but recognize what you're getting into when you follow me there. You can check out my work at WGR550.com, on-demand audio. Sports Talk Saturdays, my main show there. And then Food for Thought. Every Friday night, we run a live broadcast from 9 o'clock to about 10-ish. We've got usually feature one great guest every week. Sometimes it's national, sometimes it's local. But I use my connections, and I've got a lot of fun stuff kind of coming up here in the next couple of weeks and months ahead. So yeah, I'm excited to do it, man.
Where does it come out again?
It's excuse me. On Buffalo Rumblings. Okay. So Buffalo Rumblings is SB Nation's Bills page. I think it's buffalorumblings.com. You can follow him on Twitter at Buff Rumblings. And then if you just Google search Buffalo Rumblings Podcast Network, you'll see our podcast listed under there. So you can't go to the Apple Play Store or to your wherever you get your podcast, type in Food for Thought, type in Buffalo Rumblings, and that's how you'll find our podcast.
Nate, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.
We
Thanks for having
appreciate
me,
it. This
fellas.
was great. Go check him out. Go check out the podcast and get excited for this Bill season because it's going to be crazy.
And this will be part 2 of this episode. We will simply talk about Mike Kelly and only Mike Kelly. Or I hope that you also, did the listener, are you Ned Kelly here too or no?
They don't know about that.
They don't. So part 2 is going to be needed because I'm going to have to break the story on Ned Kelly. He was my tight end. I've got
Part 2.
Part 2 is going to be a doozy.
Sounds good. Make sure you're subscribed. All right. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Pleasure.